This is the place where we know and we practice the spiritual truth that God is good. And the universe is for us. And I am so grateful to be with you all this morning. I'm going to start with our reading from our book of the month, The 5 Principles by Ellen Davenport. Today we are talking about Principle 5, which you will learn more about here in a little bit. Reading from page 118. I say that for Jeffrey Kalin. Putting principle into action starts as an inside job. To bring peace to the world, be peaceful. This means not yelling at the kids or making obscene gestures at other drivers. It means patience in the grocery line, even if the person in front of you clearly has more than 10 items for express checkout. You don't have to find a solution for the Middle East to contribute to peace for the planet. If enough people begin to be peaceful, peace will erupt on earth just as violence does now. If you want to practice principle beyond your own home, try seeing the divinity in other people. Try treating each person you meet as a Messiah in disguise. Try taking responsibility for what you have created in your life and what your family, your city, country, and the human species have created together. Try spending some time alone to remember your connection to spirit and move ego aside to let the divine flow through you. Remember, you are moving energy with your consciousness, regardless of whether you get off the couch. Action includes the thoughts and feelings you contribute to the whole, the one mind. We know from Principle 3 that what we focus on expands. That means we can live the truth merely by focusing. Focus on peace and harmony in your workplace. Focus on love in your family. See whether it makes a difference. If nothing else, you are adding peace and love to the one mind, thought by thought. Some good stuff right there. I'm going to read through our affirmation once, and then I'll ask you to join me. Everywhere I look, I see the infinite presence of the living one. Grounded in oneness and unity, I see and know the truth. God is large and in charge, and heaven is at hand. And so it is. Please stand and join me with conviction. Everywhere I look, I see the infinite presence of the living one. Grounded in oneness and unity, I see and know the truth. God is large and in charge, and heaven is at hand, and so it is. I have a slight revision to that song. We need to put a lot of love in our hearts. We might start small. You know, we can accomplish anything by starting small. In Practical Mysticism class this week, we were talking about developing a committed meditation practice. And I said, start with 2 minutes a day. Seriously, I can do anything for 2 minutes a day, right? If I can just sit and be quiet and do my very best to still my mind for 2 minutes, then you know what? Then I can believe I can do it for 3 minutes. And then I believe I can do it for 4 and 5 and 10. And next thing you know, you're meditating all day, 24/7. It's good. You want some of that? I want some of that. You know, all month long, we have been talking about the 5 principles that we teach in unity. Who can tell me what the first principle is? God is all there is. One essence, one life, one beingness. It is in expression. The universe, if you will, is the very body of God. How cool is that? The chair you're sitting on is a finger of God. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. There is only one life, one power, one presence, and it is having its expression in, as, and through all things. And we spent some time talking about that, didn't we? And exactly what that means and how we make it real for our lives. And then the second principle is, I am. If God is all there is, I must be part of its divine expression. I am not all of God. I can't be. But I am, maybe it's a little fingernail, I don't know. I am an expression of this infinite divine. That it is knowing itself more fully as my life. And I come to know it more fully when I begin to live a more conscious life. And the third principle is co-creators with God. Because we are created in the image and likeness of this infinite beingness, and it is creative, right? We look around, everything that we see is a result of the infinite creativity of God, right? And if we are created in its image and likeness, then we too must be what? Creative. And so there is a creative process that we are using all the time, even when we're not aware of it. That's the good news and the bad news, right? Because we are always creating our experience of life with every moment and every breath. Now, let me ask you this question. How's your experience of life going? Yeah, if you're like me, a lot of my life is super, super good. And then there's these little things. And I am as responsible for those little things as I am for all of the parts that are good. And Emma Curtis Hopkins told us the same consciousness that creates our good creates our problems. And the same consciousness that created our problems can heal our problems. What? You have the power, because you are created in the image and likeness of the infinite creator, you have the power to shift your experience of life through a conscious presence. And the fourth principle we talked about last week is we use the communion with God, the tool that we use to enact the creative process consciously, because remember, we're always using the creative process, right? If we want to use it consciously, we use the spiritual technology, the spiritual tool called prayer. And we don't pray a begging kind of prayer, do we? What kind of a prayer do we pray? An affirmative prayer. We affirm and declare and know the spiritual truth that the universe is for us, and that as we anchor in that truth, we can declare our good. And how cool is that? That not only are we responsible for our experience of life, we have the ability to shift our experience of life. And the fifth principle is, which we're talking about today, action. You got to be about it. The universe says, yeah. It's of no use to know these principles if you don't put them to work in your life. And so the fifth principle is put the principles to work. And actually, the fifth principle is a practice. We're going to put the principles to work in our lives to create a different experience of life and to create a better world for all of us to live in. So what does it mean? What does it look like to walk the conscious spiritual path? To put to work these tools that we've been given? What does it mean to apply spiritual principle in our daily lives? And that is what I have termed practical spirituality. And Ellen Davenport in this book, she's laid out a really nice formula based on the principles we just talked about. She says to think about the first four principles, and then we can move into the fifth. So here's an experience I had earlier this week. I went to the pharmacy to pick up my prescription that I've been paying $7 copay for quite a long time. Beginning of the year and new insurance, it was $143. I about came unglued. I about came unglued all over this poor pharmacy tech, who really has nothing to do with it, right? Not only, I asked her later, I said, you don't work usually in this store, do you? And she said, no. She said, I work at the other store, I'm filling in here. And she doesn't even know me. She's never seen me before. And I had a moment where my $143 prescription was going to be all about how bad she is. Have you ever done this? Am I alone here? I don't think so. So what Ellen Davenport, the prescription, if you will, that Ellen Davenport would recommend here is that we employ the 5 principles. She says the first question, before taking action, before doing something, do I affirm divine intelligence and love in this situation? Can there be divine intelligence and love in my $143 prescription situation that used to be $7 situation? Absolutely. Because if God is all there is, God is all there is, right? And so there is something in the unfolding here that contains the divinity, the infiniteness of the universe, because we just said earlier, everything is an expression of the divine, right? All right, let me think about that for a second. I'll move on to question 2 and come back to it. Question 2, do I remember my own divinity and that of others involved? Do I remember not only is God in the situation, God is right where I am, and this sweet little pharmacy tech is also an expression of the divine? Am I willing to recognize that and treat us both as though that were the truth instead of come unglued, which my tummy really wanted to do? The third thing I can ask myself, do I take responsibility? You ready? Do I take responsibility for attracting this situation into my experience and know that its outcome for me will match my thoughts and feelings about it? This is where the rubber meets the road. Am I willing to take experience that there is something in me that is willing to have this experience? That's why it's showing up. And yeah, we have all of this story about, big insurance and healthcare in our country. And yes, there's a lot of things broken. We don't deny that there aren't a lot of things broken in our healthcare system, right? We don't deny the condition. We deny, you've heard me say this before, we deny that the condition has any power over us. Can I take responsibility for this experience and know that there is something in it for me to learn about living more fully from the consciousness of the infinite? It's a big question, isn't it? Number 4, this is our 4th principle. Have I aligned myself with God, the universe, the good, and received guidance before I come unglued all over this poor little pharmacy tech? Have I aligned myself? Have I affirmed the infinite good that is in this situation? Have I said, no, I am not going to succumb to the human temptation to lash out, to the part of me that is afraid about money, is afraid about healthcare, is afraid about this, that, and the other thing, and so we'll take it out on this person who really has no control at all over the situation? Am I willing to stand in what I know, recognize the divinity in her, recognize the divinity in me, recognize the divinity in the situation, affirm that something greater than this situation is unfolding? And you'd probably give me a B on how well I did in that moment. And I went home and I called my doctor and I called my insurance company. We got it all worked out and I got a $7 prescription. So we're doing all right. Right? But in the moment, you see, this is the practical application of what we teach week after week after week. How am I going to behave differently in the moment? Because I can tell you, not that many years ago, I would have come unglued all over her. Do you ever do this kind of stuff? I have a feeling I'm probably not the only one. So practical spirituality, applying what we teach every day in our lives, inspires a way of being. And the way of being inspires right action. Do you see how my call was to begin to embody something different in consciousness and then act from that place to be in the world, in the worldly experience as Jesus taught, but not of it. To be in the but not allow the worldly experience to tell me how to think or feel or act or do. I am not of the world. I am having a human experience in the world. And sometimes that just irritates the you-know-what right out of me. But I am called to something greater. For I am called to live from my divinity. I am called to live from the God mind, from the God heart, from the love that we affirm the universe is. You see, we get mixed up in the world. Patty, will you please come help me for a second? We get mixed up in the world. And I have a little demonstration that I hope will sort this out a little bit for you. Can we go a little further to the front? Here's the thing. We're going to let the water bottle represent the things that we want to have in life. Perhaps for you, that's a rewarding career that uses your skills and compensates you well. Perhaps for you, that's a family. Perhaps for you, it's the divine right partner, the person that you can really fall in love with and partner with in life. Perhaps it's a lovely retirement that you're looking forward to. Perhaps it's a beautiful home. Whatever the things are that you want to have in life, the water bottle represents. The phone represents the things that we do in the world to get those things, right? What is it? What's our doingness in the world? We're going to let the book represent what we must be, all right? Now, I don't know about you, but somehow in my early life, I got an idea that in order to have what I wanted, that I needed to have what I wanted before I could do the things that life was calling me to, and before I could be what God would have me be, before I could be happy, before I could be prosperous. Somehow I thought I had to have the right job, I had to have the right partner, I had to have the right house in order to do and be all that God would have me do and be. Anybody? If only I had the right job, I could be happy. If only I had the right partner, I could be happy. If only I had $1 million, I could do the things I want to do. Yes? Now, some of us think if I do all the right things, I'll have everything I want. If I work really hard, if I do this, if I do that, if I invest well, if I whatever, right? Then I can have the water bottle, everything I want. And then I'll be happy. Yes? Some of us get all tied up in, well, I'll just be happy. And I don't know if that's ever going to get me a doing or a having. I'm just going to be happy. And we find ourselves not really kind of moving through life wishy-washy. Make sense? Which are you? I know for a long time I was like, I'll be happy. And I'll do what is mine to do when I have the water bottle. And I didn't have the water bottle, so I watched a lot of TV. Right? But the thing is, you guys, we got to be something. Because what? Because of the creative process. Consciousness is cause. We are created in the image and likeness of the infinite creator. And it creates from consciousness. We create from consciousness. So we got to be the book before the right doingness, before the phone can make itself available so I can have what I want. I got to be the book before I can do the phone and have the water bottle. I need a drink of water. And this is true of our individual lives as well as our collective experience, right? We feel like as a country, we want to have some things, don't we? Are we willing to be what we need to be to have those things? Are we willing to do from that right beingness, from the consciousness of love, from the consciousness of peace? This is right out of this morning's reading. From the consciousness of abundance, that there is plenty and enough for all. If I can be that, then my right doing is inspired, isn't it? And I begin to do all of the things that need to be done in order for everybody to have potable water, in order for everybody to have health care, in order for everybody to have all their needs met. But we keep putting the have first, or the do first. We forget It all springs from consciousness. It all springs from the book. And then we are inspired to right doing. And we, collectively, as a culture, as a country, as a planet, can have all that the universe wants us to have. The universe really is in a conspiracy for our good. Honest. Because do you see any lack anywhere? Honest to Pete, guys. We see lack because we haven't been what we need to be for all the good to show up. The fact is there is plenty and enough. We live in a universe of abundance. There is plenty and enough for us to have all that we could possibly want to have if we're willing to be in a consciousness of plenty. The only reason we don't have what we want to have is we're in a consciousness of lack. We are being a source of lack. So our doing is driven by lack. And we don't have the water bottle of abundance for all. So, how do we move into a consciousness of being all that God would have us be? Being the consciousness of love, the consciousness of peace, joy, abundance, wisdom. How do we move into an ability to be all of that so that our doing can be inspired and we can have the life, the culture, the planet that we really want to live? Well, Ellen Davenport says we need to experiment. So, begin to experiment. One of the suggestions she has is to watch the news. See, when I'm watching the news, it's really easy for me to forget to be something. Right? The truth is, I am being something. I'm being irritable, angry. It's easy for me to forget to be the consciousness of love. But you see, the truth is the news is just the news. The negativity in the news comes from my opinion about it. Did you hear that? The negativity in the news comes from my opinion about it. If I can be something, I can know in the same way that I'm having this experience with the pharmacy tech, I can know that there is some greater purpose here, and I dare say that the greater purpose that we are being called to know love. That can I sit and watch the news and know that the news is just the news, that the negativity in the news is my attitudes, my assumptions with which I receive the news. And then I go back to my checklist, which, by the way, is on page 112 for those of you who are going to do some homework this week. Do I affirm divine intelligence and love in this situation? It's kind of hard watching the news these days, isn't it? But how do you get good at anything? We talked about this last week. You practice, right? That somehow there is a greater something that is happening in this situation that from my small, myopic human point of view, I perhaps can't see quite yet. But as I grow in consciousness, I begin to see the divinity, the divine intelligence and love in the situation, and that divinity is being called forth from me. Because that's the only thing that's going to heal it. And if I see a chasm of a lack of love, my job is to throw love at it. My job is to throw peace at it. That's my job. My job is to take responsibility. When I am watching the news, am I willing to take responsibility for what is going on? Hey, you know what? I voted him in. Right? We collectively voted him in. We're getting the results of our consciousness, people. I hate to tell you this. We are getting, see, consciousness is a cause, right? Our collective consciousness has created a really messy situation. Consciousness is cause. We created it. Let's take responsibility for it and create it anew. Do your checklist. Have I aligned myself with God? Have I prayed about it? How many of us just want to complain about the news? We don't want to pray about it. We don't want to take responsibility for it. We don't want to see the divinity in it. And not only do we want to complain about it, we want to make all of them wrong. Is there healing in that? Is there healing in making everybody out there wrong? Absolutely not. In fact, you know what's what we're doing when we make them wrong is we're setting up that wall of resistance, aren't we? What we resist persists. And if we set up that wall of resistance, they can do nothing but push back. I always think of, one of my favorite examples is when somebody tells me to calm down. What happens when somebody tells you to calm down? That is not a way to get me to calm down. Do you see, we set up resistance by pushing back, by making people wrong. And what we resist persists. And so Ellen Davenport suggests we practice by watching the news. I was reflecting on an experience I had a number of years ago. Gosh, this is actually many years now. My boss was not a kind man. And it was my job to respond to him. And what I kept saying is, if only I could have a good boss, then I could do my job well and I could be happy. If only I had a kind boss. What? You know, at the time where I was in my spiritual evolution, that was actually a really rational thing. But the fact is, I am called to be something in the presence of my unkind boss. And to do well. And to show up. And to be present. And you know what? I get evolved out of that. And I find myself with a kind, or a kinder, anyway, boss, until I fully take responsibility for my experience of life, and I learn that lesson, and now I get nothing but kind bosses. Like, how cool is that? My boss right now is our board of trustees. Are they kind people? They're terrific, aren't they? Please, that's a demonstration of prayer. You see, consciousness is cause, and as I owned my stuff, I think I'm not going to be happy until I have a kind boss. Oh, see, I was going to Unity of Bellingham then, and I was just starting to learn these principles. I was like, you mean I have to love him? Oh, come on. Oh, come on. And you know what? There was not, I would say in the 2.5 probably years I had still in that job, after I began to apply these principles, was he the kindest guy in the world? No, but was I more peaceful? Was I doing a better job? Absolutely. And that is where, I mean, that's called integrity, right? Don't you want to have integrity in your life? I do. What I don't want to have is anybody's behavior, anybody else's bad behavior telling me how to be and what to do, because I am called to something greater. I am called to be the presence of love. I am called to recognize the spiritual truth that I am an emanation of the divine, and as I get my bloated nothingness out of the way, the divine emanates more and more. Just yesterday, I had an opportunity to practice. I had cleaned out part of the garage in the morning. I had gone through my office, done some things, and I'd filled up 3 boxes to take to the Goodwill. And then I had to go return these things, and I had to go to the grocery store, and I had to go buy a birthday card, and I had to get a bag of limes. And I needed to go to the recycle place where you can drop off electronics. Those are all the things I needed to do. And I left, and I went to the store. I got the card. I got the limes. I went to the Goodwill. I got in the line to drop off my stuff. Do you know once you are in that line, you cannot get out? 40 minutes later, I get to the head of the line. I got all these 4 or 5 other things to do, and I still have to be home by 3 o'clock. I got a hard 3 o'clock deadline because people are meeting me to go somewhere. 40 minutes later, I got 40 minutes to sit there and think about this sermon. What am I called to be in this situation? surely they can move a little faster. Surely, if I would become willing to be more filled with loving kindness, the line would move faster. But you see, that can't be the motivation, right? The motivation is I am an emanation of the infinite, and all it wants to do is express as me, and all it wants to do is express as love in me. That's the motivation, not to get the line to move faster, not to get more stuff. The motivation is to be what God would have me be for 40 flippin' minutes of waiting. Oh, wait. Here's my checklist, page 112. Do I affirm divine intelligence and love in this situation? Do I remember my own divinity? Oh, maybe I could just sit here and think about God. Maybe I could just be in the car and kind of do sort of an aware meditation, because I do have to roll forward 4 feet every 2.5 minutes. Maybe I could get some of those napkins I have out of the glove box and get them wet with my water bottle right here and wipe down this dusty little car. Right? Do you see? Then I begin to out of a place of beingness, I begin to do things that actually start to have value, and I can have peace. Which is really all any of us want, yes? And I did my 40 minutes, and I didn't have time to go and do my other errands. And I went home, and we left at 3 o'clock. And you know, do you think those other errands will be there next Saturday? And did I have a different experience than I would have had if I'd been stomping on the floor and complaining and being rah, rah, rah? And when I pulled up to the front, I was one car back, and the woman got out of the car ahead of me, and she wasn't, you could just tell, she was mad. You know, she was like how I wanted to be when I first got and realized what, and she wasn't really yelling, but you could just tell by her body language and by how she was talking to the attendant that she had not done her checklist. Right? And so then the attendant is having a different experience, right? Who is a really low-income worker, you guys. Let's be kind to these people. Yes? And so it gave me a moment to think about, how do I, from my beingness, how do I want to do or behave toward this attendant who is probably experiencing a fair amount of abuse from all the people who've been waiting in this line? And I can show up differently for this beloved of God than perhaps she is often seen. And you know, it's not a big deal. You just, oh, hi, here, let me help you, right? And the divinity that I am expresses and just washes all over somebody else. And she gets to have a little bit better experience of her day. How does that sound? Now, what is your example? How are you going to practice? What is the thing that's happening in your life right now that you have an opportunity to affirm divine intelligence and love is unfolding? Do you got one? Maybe it's a big thing, maybe it's a small thing. Can you begin to affirm divine love and intelligence unfolding in that situation? Can you recognize your own divinity? Can you recognize your own wholeness? That you too are an expression of the divine in this situation. Here comes the good one. Are you willing to take some responsibility? I got in the line. There was no guarantee. There was no sign at the beginning of the line that said, you know, quickie in and out. I saw there were a lot of cars in the line when I pulled in. I chose to get in the line anyway. Am I willing to take responsibility for my own experience of life and know that its outcome will always match my thoughts and feelings? And am I willing to simply get quiet with the divine and affirm that infinite good? And by taking right action, I align myself with infinite good, and I begin to have a greater experience of life. Shall we pray? I invite you to turn within and recognize with every breath the divinity, the perfection, the allness, the wholeness of the universal presence flowing as you. Begin to recognize the spiritual truth that there is only one life. That life is expressing in, as, and through all things, the sun, the stars, the infinite things of space. The infinite emptiness of space is the very mind, the heart, the body of God, and it is right here on planet Earth where we are. Is the divinity expressing? Is the wholeness of life in expression, the allness, every cell, everything, all that we see and touch and feel and smell, all there is an expression of this infinite divine. And we recognize that we are at one with it, for we are something. We are something. And the infinite something has created us. And we simply allow ourselves to bask in that revelation of truth, to recognize that this something greater than we are has said yes to our inherent good, has said yes to the life that we live. And so it is with a sense of gratitude that we look about our lives and we notice the places of joy, and we notice the places of challenge, we notice the places of pain, and we give thanks for it all. For we recognize that divinity is an expression in all things. And God means all things for good. All things for good. And so we look for the good. We praise the good. We open our hearts to the good. And we allow that to motivate our doingness in the world from this state of being. We be about healing the pain. We be about helping others in the consciousness of love. We be about providing where there is lack. We be about saying yes where there is a no. We simply allow our doingness in the world to be motivated by love. For Jesus taught us the first commandment, love God. Love your neighbor as yourself. And we say yes to this teaching, and we allow our hearts to beat with the very thrum of love every moment of every day. I give thanks that we have been given the power, the creative power, to create a world that works for ourselves and for everyone. I give thanks that we are empowered to make a positive difference in the world. I give thanks that there is nothing beyond the creative power of the infinite, that indeed a great and mighty healing has already taken place. It has taken place in consciousness, and we simply allow it to unfold. And so it's with a grateful heart that I simply say yes to the transformation in consciousness that has happened here today, and to the transformation that is already happening in the world through the power of love, through the power of our own peaceful hearts. And so I give thanks. I surrender it. I release it to the law that always says yes. And so it is. Amen.